There's a lot of highly disturbing things going on in the world today, right? And this is certainly one of them. And the whole of Southeast Asia, as you mentioned, and a very large proportion of India is experiencing unprecedented early extreme heat waves. We're looking at 800 million people. 800 million people are experiencing, surviving this extreme heat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Climate Emergency Forum. My name is Regina, and I'll be your host as we discuss brutal heat and flooding in Southeast Asia. This week, our planet has seen a tremendous amount of flooding, from Houston to Brazil, and to our topic of the day, Southeast Asia. It has been brutal across the globe. And I want to quote Coleridge because I love his poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and it gives us so much to ponder. And the lines that I read when I was in high school, I will always remember. Water, water everywhere, and all the boards did shrink. Water, water everywhere, nor any a drop to drink. Now, why am I bringing Coleridge into the picture? Because we are seeing a tremendous amount of water, a tremendous amount of drought, and no safe water anywhere. The heat is incredible. The heat's incredible. Dozens of people have died because of this heat. I emphasize people because no one's taking account of the other beings that are dying because of the extreme heat. Human beings have this unique property of being able to sweat that most other animals don't have. So while it's very, very difficult for us to adapt to a degree of heat beyond which that we've been equipped for, other animals just really don't stand a chance. They just don't. So many things have been happening, terrible, tragic things directly caused by global warming. Directly caused, there's no question here, okay? And that is dozens of people dying from heat stroke, at least 30 in Thailand. So many kids, it's uncalculable. So many kids missing school because it's too hot to attend school. Crops failing. Bangladesh, it's a blighted place in a way. It's just a place where there are so many people in great concentration living in poverty. These people cannot repair to their living rooms with the air conditioning. They've just had the hottest April ever recorded, with their daily temperatures reaching 33.2 Celsius, which is around 92 degrees Fahrenheit. Very, very hot. I also want to bring to mind that about 75% of Bangladesh is below sea level. It's really a disaster. No one should live there. No one should live in a place where it's below sea level. And then they get so many incredible storms. So not only is it below sea level, you have a tremendous amount of people packed in, but you also have sea level rise and these storms. 400,000 people every single year moving into Dhaka. It is a death sentence. It is a death sentence. Now, Myanmar, they've reached a crazy temperature that I can't even fathom. Their high in April was 48.2 degrees Celsius, which is around 118 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, they can't repair to the air conditioning. They have to live in the elements. In India, 109 degrees Fahrenheit. That's in Kolkata. And of course, many of us know how poverty-stricken that area is. So the intensity and the duration of these heat waves is just increasing over time. And as we all know, warmer air holds more moisture. So then what happens? You don't have the nice rainstorms of yore. These are like deluges, tremendous downpours. So we see these extremes of heat and rain and flooding. This causes so many difficulties for everyone experiencing it. I want to pass it on to Peter Carter to hear what you have to say about these recent developments.
Thanks, Regina. There's a lot of highly disturbing things going on in the world today, right? And this is certainly one of them. And the whole of Southeast Asia, as you mentioned, and a very large proportion of India is experiencing unprecedented early extreme heat waves. We're looking at 800 million people. 800 million people are experiencing, surviving this extreme heat. And the area of just Southeast Asia alone is 2.5 million square kilometers. So when our climate historian expert told us that this was the most extreme climate event in history, he's obviously right again. So India recorded the highest temperature increase at 45.9 degrees C. Everywhere in Southeast Asia and all of that side of India did experience and is still experiencing temperatures of 42 degrees and above. These are maximum temperatures. So these are the temperatures which really, really hurt people. These are the temperatures which can kill people. There was a very important sort of press release on this from UNICEF. And I really like UNICEF. They're just great. So they said that 240 million children are being exposed to record dangerous heat waves in Southeast Asia and India. It's not suddenly happened, by the way. This has been going on for a month at least. And it's not suddenly happened either because last year and the year before, we got just the same thing. Regina mentioned that absolutely crazy temperature of 48 degrees in Vietnam. They had the same thing last year, a year ago. So when the media are really reporting this very well, it's not just a sudden thing. It's going on year after year after year. It's affecting the same places and is progressively, of course, obviously getting worse. Oh, and China, this hasn't been mentioned, but I'm sure it will be. The heat tracked right up to Japan, by the way. China is under a extreme amount of global warming, and so their temperature is going to rocket again as they did last year. And we're not really under an El Nino. NOAA says, it's fading. The Australia Met Bureau said this month, which they said the past month, that we're in ENSO neutral, that there is no El Nino. So we really can't explain this or blame this on El Nino anymore. And in that respect, I was very happy with the Copernicus press release because they said this is greenhouse gases. This heat is greenhouse gases being trapped in the atmosphere and getting into the oceans, and that's the problem. So right on, because it is, because we really do have to appreciate that. So committed temperature increases. Now, I know the climate scientists, the experts, say that really there's no commitment because a few years ago they invented a thing with their models called the zero emissions commitment. And lo and behold, they discovered that if they immediately stop emissions, the temperature doesn't really change. Well, it is not going to be like that in the real world. It's going to be hell. The future is literally going to be hell. Southeast Asia, we've known for many, many years, was going to be hit with extreme temperatures, the worst on the planet. Plus, we knew that that would be further aggravated by increased water vapor. So they would be getting extreme wet bulb temperatures. And a paper was published just February, projecting what's going to happen to this very region. Massive, massive deaths. And if the reaction to this continues to be really no reaction, we're still not hearing from anybody telling us that the IPCC told us for the past 5 years that emissions have to be put in decline immediately. I'm not hearing that from anybody. I'm certainly not hearing that from many experts. And I'm not hearing that when the experts are reporting. Copernicus is great. I really like Copernicus. But They're really only saying that, we have to reduce emissions. That's all they say. So, I mean, good for us, good for our team. We're getting the truth out there. But we need backup from the heavy hitters of the climate experts, I believe, because this just cannot go on. This cannot go on. We cannot just be witnesses to this, to the destruction of humanity and the end of history.
Thank you so much, Peter. You're absolutely right. And when you speak of the end of history, it may sound dramatic to some, but what is. People, living beings cannot function in these temperatures. One of the things that I read that was just so moving and so tragically sad to me, there was a farmer in Thailand who had to sell, he had 5,200 ducks, over 5,000 ducks, and he had to sell them. Why? Because it has been so hot that they stopped laying eggs and he just couldn't afford to keep feeding them. I mean, this is dystopian, and it's happening, as Peter said, on our watch. So I'm going to move it on over to Paul and hear your thoughts on this Southeast Asian travesty.
Yes, thank you, Regina, and thank you, Peter. So I'm going to come at this from the other direction. I'm going to look at the big picture and look at how the big picture relates to the tremendous heat and torrential rains leading to flooding in Southeast Asia. So, it all comes back to the changes in the global climate system, global tipping points. So we've often talked about Arctic temperature amplification, the Arctic warming 4 to 7 times faster than the global average temperature. And a lot of this is due to the albedo, these feedback effects in albedo. As the Arctic loses snow and ice, it becomes darker, absorbing more solar radiation and warming up by itself because of the increased solar absorption. So there's also heat brought up by the ocean current system. And because the Arctic is warming on its own quite nicely, there doesn't need to be as much heat going northward. So this basically means we have a slowing down of the AMOC, the Arctic Marginal Overturning Circulation. And it's not one thing just causing another thing. The ocean currents are slowing for other reasons as well, and they're bringing less heat up. In fact, there's a recent paper that argues that we'd have 30% less sea ice in the Arctic now if the AMOC hadn't been slowing down. So we could have already experienced what I call the blue ocean event. So there's large changes in the global systems, but the net result is that we don't need as much heat going up to the Arctic. So that extra heat has to be somewhere, and it's in the tropics, equatorial regions, including Southeast Asia, and it's also in the southern hemisphere, warming the oceans there significantly, causing a catastrophic decline of Antarctic sea ice and increased melt in Antarctica. So it's all part of the overall system. Also very important for Southeast Asia and the tropics is the intertropical convergence zone, which is a band of very high, it's very hot air in the tropics. There's a lot of convection, rising air, a lot of water vapor from increased evaporation of the oceans in that region. And that basically supercharges the atmosphere with water vapor and clouds and rainfall, which changes the precipitation patterns, of course, in that region. And because of this overall shift in temperature, the ITCZ is almost like located in a region of where temperature in the hemisphere above, the northern hemisphere, and the southern hemisphere below is kind of balanced. And because of the change in the Arctic, we're getting shifts in the ITCZ location, and it's responsible for generating the monsoons that we see, which are very important for providing food for, literally over 1 billion people. The monsoons, as the ITCZ shifts, the monsoon behavior can change. It can move south of where it is right now and cause huge problems in growing food. Also, the warming of the southern oceans, of course, means that the carbon sink is smaller. The water because it's warmer, becomes stratified, so there's less vertical mixing. We don't get as much water descending from the surface, high in carbon, and this is a major carbon sink in the Earth's climate system. So that's reduced as well. We're also seeing more, a friend of mine in British Columbia, who you may be aware of his program, which is Radio EcoShock or EcoShock Radio. I'm talking about Alex Smith. I corresponded with him recently, and he said that there was a lot of warmth in beginning of this year, January, and a lot of buds were out on. And then there was a killing frost, which followed, which basically killed a lot of the grapes for the wine industry in British Columbia, and also disrupted the growth of fruits and vegetables that are grown on very fertile soils in mid-central British Columbia. So these temperature swings are very detrimental to the food supply. So, we're focusing on Southeast Asia, but the temperature, the huge temperature that they're seeing, and it's early, it's not even summer yet, it's spring in the Northern Hemisphere, and the huge disruption of the hydrology, so the rainfall, we're getting torrential rains leading to massive flooding there and other places around the world. Those things are all part of what's happening with the overall global climate system, the big picture of climate.
Thank you for sharing that, Paul. As you were speaking, and especially, of course, as you mentioned, these things are happening not just in Southeast Asia, but of course, we're focusing on it because we're seeing so many extremes in Southeast Asia. Although, let's be honest, it's getting to the point where it's hard to focus on just one region because this is happening globally, almost all at the same time, it seems. It's crazy. One of the effects of this flooding, the extreme heat, and I touched on it already, the youth of these countries are not able to attend school. You can't attend school when your home is flooding, torrential rain is pouring through your house, or when it's 110 degrees. This is a travesty of great proportions. We are no longer an agricultural society. We are a global world that is interconnected, where education is critical. When children don't attend school and they are deprived of an education, their outlook is not so good. And when this happens as a collective, the outlook for that society is not good. And we know in particular that especially young males, when they don't attain the education that they need to acquire decent jobs, can be lured into a life of crime. And when we see mass criminality, this leads to destabilization of societies. So it's not anything to play around with. It's not like, yeah, I am bummed about the wine, I'm not going to lie, but it goes beyond that. The ramifications are tremendously profound. And not only in the negative, think of how many doctors and teachers and researchers and artists we're losing because they're not able to develop their talents, because it is too hot to be in a classroom. This is pitiful, this is pathetic, and this is the fault of just a few industries that are destroying the planet. I can't put it any other way, and I'm going to pass it back to Peter. Peter, what are your thoughts?
So thanks, Regina. Yeah, and thanks for pointing out what a global historic travesty is. It's an unprecedented travesty. Nothing approaching this has ever happened before. I'd like to go back to the UNICEF and the 250 million children in Southeast Asia who are now suffering. And they're, of course, we know that they're the most vulnerable so-called subpopulation to extreme heat. So what about children? I recall that the IPCC Sixth Assessment actually, surprisingly to me, actually did a very good, it was quite a long essay, basically, on the plight of children. And it was in a frequently asked question. The IPCC asked this question: what is going to happen to the world's children if the world does not immediately put global emissions into decline? Yeah, that's a quote because I've read this several times. And the reading was very, very grim indeed. With respect to, I mean, we're looking at our own survival in the future, but for heaven's sake, it's so obvious that we're looking at the survival of huge amounts of children. They will be dying in Southeast Asia with absolutely unbelievable high wet bulb temperatures. They'll try and move. How many people are going to be moving from the south, from India and Southeast Asia, plunging our world into absolute chaos? So what are we going to do for these kids? That would be my question. Because right now, actually, we should not be focusing on 1.5 degrees C at all. We should not be mentioning it because, as James Hansen says, it's long dead. What we should be focusing on is actually the realistic, practical commitment that we're under, and that is 3.2 degrees C. Because the IPCC assessment told us that on what they call business as usual continued emissions, that the world would heat up to 3.2 degrees C. In my opinion, anything at 2 degrees C or above is the end of our world, because absolutely all of the tipping points kick in by 2 degrees C. So what we have to do for the world's children is we do all have to respond to the death sentence that our fossil fuel corporations, our banking corporations, and our governments have put us on and put the world's children. That's a death sentence for them. So we have to react to 3 degrees C, not 1.5 degrees C or even 2 degrees C. We have to react to 3. And we have to use some very strong language. And we do, again, have to support the young protesters because we have to force the governments to give our kids a chance of some kind of a life in the future. Because if we don't, the IPCC again told us what would be the result. Quote, an unlivable future. So, yeah, it's a monumental travesty. And we're asking, I mean, we're pleading for the rest of the world to start getting out there and getting real and forcing the corporations and governments to stop what they're doing and give the future a chance and give, for heaven's sake, their own children a chance. So that's my thought.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for that. It's so craven of these industries, what they're doing. And as you mentioned, we need to give the kids of the world a chance. Paul, is there a chance for them?
Well, a term that you're hearing more and more of these days is eco-anxiety. So all of these climate events and weather extreme events are disrupting many people's lives, forcing them to abandon their homes during floods and severe weather, and also, and causing huge amounts of infrastructure damage and, basically changing people's ability to basically exist in a certain region. So in 2021, the Lancet did an extensive survey of people all around the world on their concerns about climate change. And it turns out that the countries where people living in those countries are most concerned about the climate emergency, climate disruption, are people that are actually exactly in those Southeast Asian countries that we've been talking about. So Philippines, I think, ranks number 1. I mean, not only are they getting heat waves and torrential flooding and changes in all of their weather patterns, but they're also getting hit by a lot more of these tropical storms, which are known variously as cyclones, tropical cyclones, or hurricanes, or typhoons, depending on where you are in the world. Anyway, these storms are getting much more powerful and seemingly more frequent. Also, India is experiencing, many heat waves over the last number of years. In fact, it's the subject at the beginning of Kim Stanley Robinson's, fiction book on the Ministry for the Future. Massive mortality in India from, we're talking hundreds of millions of people in the story from surpassing wet bulb temperatures. And wet bulb is a real threshold effect. If you're below wet bulb of 35, people can dissipate heat, the human body can. You go above a certain level, you can't. And then we'd experience mass mortalities. So, I think in countries in Southeast Asia, on the Lancet survey, and it divides up the responses in terms of ages. You know, young people are the most concerned, and young people in those countries are very extremely concerned at sort of 80% of the population in the survey levels, which far exceeds, you know, the global averages. So basically, when people experience these climate catastrophes personally, it really does focus their and change their outlook on their assessment of the risks very, very quickly. It's not just the public, it's also the scientists. So a recent survey was done, which is just reported actually in The Guardian, about scientists' views around the world. I think there were many hundreds of scientists that were surveyed and asked, you know, do we have any possibility of 1.5? What's the likelihood of 2, 3? You know, most scientists think that, you know, it's going to be very difficult to avoid 3 degrees Celsius. And, you know, many of them in countries in Southeast Asia, you know, there's scientists that are reporting from around the world. They're most negative in their views. And, you know, I think a lot of eco-anxiety, when you think about it, the source of the anxiety, it's not necessarily the climate change. The source of the anxiety is the lack of leaders, country leaders, politicians, governments, to take any action on climate change. They're not taking any action. Our emissions are hitting ever record levels. The source of the anxiety can be changed. It can be removed, can be eliminated. And that's if politicians actually went and did stuff, treated the problem seriously and took action. And then the anxiety would turn into sort of agency and action and hope. And I think, you know, rather than have the anxiety and the fear, we need to turn these emotions into anger against our political leaders. Because, you know, Peter's mentioned, and many have mentioned, the fossil fuel subsidies, which have continued to rise, continued building of pipelines, et cetera. And part of the problem is that many governments own the actual oil companies. So it's not that they're subsidizing fossil fuels, they're actually owning the production of the fossil fuels, which is even worse. So, you know, they're basically killing their own people by doing this. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to think about. But if we, you know, when we start seeing government action, then that should reduce the anxiety and actually enable agency, which is the ability to change the future. I mean, it's all fine and dandy to have models predicting the future, but, you know, let's change the future. Let's not just predict it. Let's actually do things on all different levels of society, from individuals up to governments, to actually change our future and make sure that we have a livable future on this planet. We're losing that window of doing that is getting smaller and smaller, of course, but I don't think it's vanished yet.
Thanks so much for that, Paul. I really like the idea. Change the future. Change the future. And I'm going to suggest that in order to do that, sure, we've talked about going vegan, but what we can do is change our politicians and their beholdenness to the fossil fuel industry, to big ag, and change the fact that we are all being owned by big oil. I think if the people can do that, well, we can do anything. I'm not ready to give up hope. We have to keep trying, people. We have to keep trying. So I want to thank you for trying. Knowledge is power. I hope that you've gained some knowledge during this show. When you know something, you can speak to it. The more people are speaking, the less they can shut us down and shut us out. So let's keep talking and keep tuning in to the Climate Emergency Forum, because we bring you new shows and we're going to be working on getting you more and more new and exciting guests, because we've heard from you that you enjoy that. So we appreciate the things that you share with us and, you know, the suggestions you have for our show. So keep coming back, subscribe, share, and we'll see you next time at the Climate Emergency Forum.